Thank you, Dr. Federley, for that beautiful music as we begin our service. And thank you, Laura, and thank you, Mignon, for so warmly introducing our service this morning. As we light our chalice flame, I share with you these words that were on my heart as we began this day. May this flame be a symbol for the light falling on our path ahead. A light which shows us the way out of the world of fear, isolation, and disruption created by COVID and political chaos. May it light our way toward a period of recovery, renewal, and reconnection. May the season of turmoil recede behind us as we join hands and humbly and thankfully walk hand in hand towards a new world forming. May we be alive to the new possibilities and promise awaiting us so that the future may become what our hopes promise us it could be. Today, in anticipation of Father's Day, I will talk about fathers I have known. I will begin talking about my biological father, and next I will talk about two transitional figures for me that helped me from one stage of life to the next. Then I will talk about three men who were not only transitional figures, but formative figures for me, helping me to grow, I hope, in some new ways as a human being. During the ages of 19 to about 38, I consciously or unconsciously sought out father figures or mentors, some would say, to help guide me. I did so naturally and spontaneously, but in a way relentlessly. I admired and learned from literally dozens of people, but the individuals I will talk about today are people who, for particular reasons, I got to know very well. In my series on faith development, I talked about the fact that the relationship is the most powerful determinant of faith development, and that was true for me. It has been true for me. It was proximity to these people that created an atmosphere which allowed me to grow. Behind these stories of fathers I have known is the question, what does it mean to be a man? I look forward to exploring this further with you in a few moments. May we go back to Mignon at this time. Thank you, Emily, for that beautiful and powerful story. And Mignon, thank you for that hymn. I must confess, that is one of my favorite hymns. It weaves together the power of the generations and the power of nature and the power of the self and brings them all together. And it's just very powerful to me. Thank you. In talking about men in anticipation of Father's Day and in talking about fathers, it is, of course, I'm sure it goes without saying, something that in any way diminishes the role of women. I could preach a number of sermons about the effect powerful women have had on my life and have helped me in innumerable ways, but today is a day where I would like to give homage to fathers and to men who struggle with being the best men they can possibly be. My father's name was Andrew Benjamin Brock. At the end of his high school years coincided with the beginning of the Great Depression of 1929. He went to work at age 19 at United States Steel, and he would work for them for 43 years, rising to the level of a metallurgist. From this example, I learned perseverance. As a young person, my father read so much that his many siblings called him Doc, doctor for short. From this, I learned the value of learning. He was a good student and had high aspirations for himself. But what life offered him was limitations, and he had not the means or the conditions or the opportunities to fulfill his dreams. The iron hand of necessity and survival pressed against him. When I was 10 years old, he began to take me to see the most respected lawyers practicing in the courts of Birmingham, Alabama at that time. He would point to them, he would get me to study their way of speaking and arguing, and it was as though he were saying to me, I could not make it into something better, but perhaps you can. I did not learn, or I did not study to be a lawyer. However, what I learned during those days has helped me a great deal in arguing with UUs through the years. He had very liberal political and social views, and he revered Dr. King and President Kennedy, and he freely shared those views within the context of the home, and often. From this, I learned the progressive views I hold until today. He never spoke publicly about his political or social views for the simple fact that it would have been catastrophic to his career and social position. From this, I learned the painful lesson of adapting to the social context. My parents went to church every Sunday. From this, I learned that values are important to life. We took numerous family trips. My father and I took some special trips by ourselves to St. Augustine to see my Uncle Eric there, who was in his own right a father figure to me, ebullient and well-liked by the citizens of St. Augustine where he lived. During the last 5 years of my father's career, he was given 12 months of vacation time every year, which he used to take long trips with the family. We went to New York 3 or more times, Chicago 3 or more times, and Washington, D.C. at least 5 times, staying with relatives, going there and coming back each time. From this, I received the message that there is a very large world out there beyond Fairfield, Alabama, and I needed to know about it. He retired at age 62 after 43 years of service. In his retirement, he visited the sick of his church and faithfully delivered Meals on Wheels several times every week of the year. From this, I learned that service to others is what life is about. He visited my mother every day when she was in the assisted living home, when she had Alzheimer's the last 3 years of her life. From this, I learned what love is. My father hugged me and told me regularly that he loved me from the time I was a boy until the time he died at age 87. From this, I learned and received a blessing beyond words. Let me get a swig of water before I go further. I'm under a lot of lights here. My first transitional figure, father figure, was a man named Reverend Edwin Kimbrough. He was the senior minister of the First United Methodist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. He helped me make the transition from a teenager to adult, from someone who understood religion in a sentimental way to understanding religion as a vital force in society and in the lives of persons. It was because of him that I became a minister. My next transitional figure was Dr. Earl Gossett. He was head of the Department of Religion at Birmingham Southern College. He was a liberal and cosmopolitan thinker. He was available. He mentored others. He cared. He was a gateway between religion as I understood it as a child and teenager and religion as it was understood in the larger world. And he also facilitated my being able to go to Vanderbilt Divinity School at the University of Vanderbilt in Nashville, Tennessee, which was in itself a gateway to an entirely new world. These men helped me from one stage of life to the other. They were like adventurers who had gone before me and were able to turn back and look at me and hold out their hand and say, it's safe to go further down this road. The following men were formative to me as well as transitional figures. And the first was Rabbi Edwin Friedman. I first met him when I was a young UU minister. Friedman was born in New York City. He worked in Washington, D.C. for 35 years. He was a therapist, a consultant who worked internationally among all religious groups in this country. Very well known, a writer of several important books about congregations. And he was, to me, a most impressive figure. He was someone from a very different world than the one I had grown up in. He was always intriguing, always fascinating, and quite provocative. Over the 6 years I worked with him, he helped me understand the interconnections between religion, spirituality, ecology, science, and the larger world. After working with him for 6 years, the world was a more holistic place where I began to see the interconnections. And above all, he taught me a way of understanding systems, of understanding people and relationships that has served me faithfully through my entire adult life up until this very day and has never failed me. Rabbi Friedman, alas, was a bit of a nerd, impersonal, theoretical, and for that reason, not very easy to get close to. My next surrogate father was almost like a polar opposite, Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. Like Rabbi Friedman, Dr. Rosenberg taught internationally. He was one of the most gifted healers I have ever experienced in my life. Whereas Rabbi Friedman was all theory, thinking, and intellect, Dr. Rosenberg was immersed in the feeling world. He believed that people were solely moved by emotions and feelings, whether consciously or unconsciously. He believed that at any given moment, human beings represented a very dynamic living system of needs that must be addressed in the moment if a person is to feel whole and to feel fulfillment. Emotions were the primal force, feelings the language of those needs. He was able to read that dynamic and respond to it productively, better than any human being I have ever known, before or since. The intellect, in comparison, was a surface phenomenon, a mask we present to the world, a means to pose as rational actors to navigate the challenges of life. He was very fond of saying, follow what is alive in you and discover what is alive in you. He envisioned his mission as literally saving the world and healing the world one person at a time, one group at a time. Whereas Friedman was aloof, Dr. Rosenberg was radically available, something for which he paid a very high price. My next surrogate father was the poet Robert Bly. Robert Bly is still among us, although he is quite elevated in age. He is a poet, an author, a translator, and one of the chief leaders of the largely defunct men's movement in America. He is very hard to put into any category. More than anyone I have ever known, he was a devoted servant of creativity. He longed to live near the impulse and the process of creativity, wherever it went. If he read the poems of someone new to him who intrigued him, he would get in his car and travel hundreds of miles to go see that person and talk to them. He was one of the first in America to translate the poems of Pablo Neruda, Rumi, and other Sufi poets into English. He lived on his family farm in Minnesota and lived for purposes that transcended economic security or social status. He had graduated from Harvard. He was aware of what he had missed by the course in life he chose. On numerous occasions, he told me that one of his greatest mistakes in life was not to become a college professor and live a calm, natural life. He lived to a large extent in somewhat impoverished conditions until he hit pay dirt with his book, Iron John. One thing about Bly was he cared enormously about the well-being of men. He cared enormously about the issue of male initiation, a subject he studied assiduously. Without male initiation, he would say, men are dangerous. That is, without some kind of transition from being a teenager or a child into being an adult, some sense of purpose and direction that transcends the crass values that culture will instill, men become dangerous. I think he was accurate. Bly was, for all practical purposes, the leader, if not the originator, of the men's movement in America. In these meetings he held with men, hundreds of men would come and be with him. He typically had, as leaders to the meetings, a New Testament scholar, a psychotherapist specializing in men's issue, a shaman from Guatemala who was a close friend of his, himself, of course, and sometimes a Jungian analyst. He received tremendous respect and love from men in a manner that is very hard for me to describe. One time he was talking to a group of men in one of his regular meetings. And there were several hundred men in the audience. And bear in mind, in these audiences, they were open to men of all sexual orientations. And there was a very diverse group of people at these meetings. But in one of these meetings, he began to get up and talk about the fact that he had just buried his father about a week or two prior to this meeting. He had a problematic relationship to his father, who was unfortunately addicted to alcohol and very taciturn. That's another subject. But as he got up to speak, this man who never was at a loss for words stopped talking and he started crying silently in the center of this big stage before several hundred men, and virtually every man present began to weep as well. Such was the sense of fusion or care or respect men had toward him. Bly would speak often and eloquently of the well of sorrow and pain and anguish that exists in every man, and how it expresses itself in negative ways like addictions, anger, and violence. Bly sought to help men find other creative ways to address the difficulties and sorrows of life. I learned something from all of these men, Bly, Friedman, and Rosenberg. Rabbi Friedman embodied thinking. Dr. Rosenberg embodied feeling. Robert Bly embodied many things, but among them, imagination and instinct. They were all guides in the mysteries of being a man. I absorbed what I could. In midlife, I ventured twice to China, and together with my wife, we adopted two beautiful girls from China. And once a father myself, all interest in finding surrogate fathers drained away as my energy went towards trying to be a father myself. I am still working on it. This fall, both our girls will be in college. It is hard for me to believe. Is it all a dream? Where did the days go? Have I been the father that I wished to be? In some sense, being a father or experiencing a father involves a process as a man of what learning a man means at all, or what it means. And this issue is so fraught, particularly today, where we are acutely aware of toxic masculinity, acutely aware of white supremacy, and its intermingling with male chauvinism. And this has brought masculinity into question itself. And of course, it is no secret that it is men more than any other sexual orientation or group that have brought far more destruction and mayhem into life. The issue of being a male transcends the issue of sexual orientation, but what then is maleness? I do believe that learning to be a man requires the presence and the guidance of mentors, initiators, men who care and who are willing to guide. Robert Bly often taught that one of men's highest aspiration was to be a male mother, by which he meant being a male who can nurture others. Perhaps this is a good place to start in defining the aspirations of what it means to be a man. Let's return to Laura at this time. At this time, when we extinguish the chalice, I wanted to share a few words of appreciation. Today is the last fully zoomed out service we will be enjoying. There will be modifications of our Zoom service as we go forward, but the type of service that has been going on for a year or so, as we are doing it now, will come to an end today. And I have such a profound sense of appreciation to the very, very hardworking people who week after week, Sunday after Sunday, have made this possible. I don't want to mention everyone's names because surely I would forget someone of great importance, and they're all important, but I think you know who they are, and they've done such a stellar and dedicated job. It's just mind-blowing to me. And so my deep appreciation goes out to them. And now I would like to share some words from Rumi, a poet that Robert Bly loved very much, as we extinguish our chalice flame. Through love, all that is bitter will be sweet. Through love, all that is copper will be gold. Through love, all dregs will become wine. Through love, all pain will turn to medicine. Amen.